I'm Professor Tamir Sukkary. I teach political science courses at American River College in Sacramento, at Sierra College in Rockland, at Sacramento City College, and at Delta College in Stockton. And I teach primarily American government courses, international relations courses, comparative government courses, and politics of the Middle East classes. Egypt is a highly divided country right now politically. And it is true that there were huge protests and demonstrations on June 30th, and where Egyptians yet again took to the streets, and they called for the removal of President Morsi from power and the Muslim Brotherhood in general from power. We have a situation where the Egyptian military has essentially now removed President Morsi from power, and they have put him and his family under house arrest, and have subsequently imprisoned many of the leaders and some of the members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the defense minister, who was, by the way, appointed by President Morsi, gave him a 48-hour ultimatum to try to reach some kind of deal. President Morsi decided to move forward and sort of ignore the deadline. It's being widely debated whether or not this is a military coup that has taken place. I personally do believe it is a military coup against a freely democratically elected leader in free and fair elections. Let's not forget that under President Mubarak, and actually going back to President Abdel Nasser in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood was routinely imprisoned, put in jail, and not allowed to come to the political table to participate in ordinary politics. And we saw what that led to. I also think it's important to note that the military immediately, after exercising the coup, suspended the Constitution. Now, this Constitution is not perfect, but I've actually read the document. It's actually not a bad Constitution. It actually, in many ways, affords more rights than does the United States Constitution. I think the biggest problem with the Egyptian Constitution is that it makes all sorts of promises that there's no way they'd be able to keep, including calling for a right to education, a right to health care, and other rights that go beyond the rights that are afforded to us here in the United States Constitution. The procedure by which the Constitution was adopted really upset many of the folks in the opposition, and that's understandable. It was rushed through. The part about Sharia law and how it's interpreted was actually language taken from Anwar Sadat's, the former president of Egypt, in 1972, his constitution. Now, they were concerned about how it might be interpreted, and that's understandable given some of the mistrust that they have for the Muslim Brotherhood. But that said, the Constitution was democratically adopted by the people. One of the mainstays of any liberal democracy is having civilian rule and leadership. And even in the United States, civilian rule over the military itself. We may not see that in Egypt anytime in the near future, but I think that those of us who aspire for greater democracy and freedom in Egypt would like to see the military go back to the barracks once and for all. They seem to go back to the barracks at least for the last year or so when President Morsi was in power, but keep in mind enjoying all of their economic privileges as well. It's important to note that the military in Egypt actually controls over 35% of the economy. The members of the Egyptian military live a completely different lifestyle than most ordinary Egyptians. They have their own clubs that they go to, upper middle class folks, they kind of run the same social circles. They are in some ways sort of the elites of Egyptian society. Remember, the United States gives Egypt over $1.3 billion per year in military assistance. So the Egyptian military often comes to the United States to get trained. Their weapons are often provided by the United States. They're not certainly the most advanced, sophisticated weapons in the world, but nonetheless, so the United States does have some influence there, but I don't think most people are aware of how the Egyptian military has been a huge institution in Egypt. It's obviously a concern to me that immediately the Constitution was suspended, particularly given the fact that Egypt has a history of being ruled under martial law or emergency rule. Going back many, many decades. And that was one of the factors that drove ordinary Egyptians out into the streets to protest, was that they were tired of living under martial law, where basic civil liberties were violated. There are several reasons why Egyptians took to the streets to protest against President Morsi. They include The economic situation. The Egyptian economy is very weak at this point. All aspects of the economy. Unemployment is high, underemployment is high, inflation is very high. Basic prices for commodities and goods have gone up and have gotten out of the reach of the ordinary Egyptian. The value of the Egyptian pound has gone down. Foreign investment has gone down. Tourism, which is a big part of the Egyptian economy, has gone down, and that's largely linked to the security situation, which is another major reason, as I was mentioning earlier, that brought protesters out to the streets. It was a police state for 30 years under Mubarak, and even before that. And also, it is still a police state, but for the less than 1 year that President Morsi was in office, many of the Egyptian police decided not to do their job and provide security. And the security situation in Egypt right now is horrible. Never before have there been this many Egyptians walking around with guns, providing their own security. When there's crimes taking place, Egyptian police have stood by and watched or not gotten involved. Now, it's widely believed that because many of those Egyptian police were Mubarak loyalists. There are those protesters who oppose President Morsi's sort of what they call Islamization of Egypt and sort of moving forward with the Brotherhood's policies and not being inclusive of liberals in Egypt or the secular Egyptians or Egyptian Coptic Christians or other forces. Now, on the other hand, there are those protesters who were and are Mubarak loyalists. They could be members of the now dissolved National Democratic Party. They could be members of the Egyptian police or even some military folks and many others. It's a very diverse group of protesters. The one thing that united them was their hatred of President Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood. Now that President Morsi is no longer in power, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the opposition forces who have not shown a lot of political maturity. The Muslim Brotherhood, like them or not only, as we said earlier, won the presidency, but they also won the parliamentary elections in Egypt, and they had a large majority in the parliament. You know, Egypt is certainly in transition. It's a very fluid situation. You have various forces, the opposition forces, who are not, unfortunately, united. But the only thing that united them was their hatred for President Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood. Egypt is sort of a in-transition electoral democracy, but it is far from a true liberal democracy. But I don't think that this current move, at least in the short term, will move them toward having more of a true liberal democracy.